Okay, so good morning and welcome everyone to Making Sense of Anti-Semitism. And what we learned today, the learning today is dedicated for Refuah Shlema for Michael ben Rachel. And we want to thank Aliza Bas Rachel or Bat Rachel, Lisa Posner for sponsoring the event. And we will get started. I don't think that I think that people will just have to come in as they come into the waiting room. So there's a very famous quote from Mark Twain, and I'd like to read it to you. If you've heard it before, bear with me. It's not that long, and that's what we're going to start with. Mark Twain said about the Jew in an article for Harper's Bazaar called Concerning the Jew. He has made a marvelous fight in this world, in all the ages, and has done it with his hands tied behind him. He could be vain of himself and be excused for it. The Egyptian, the Babylonian, and the Persian rose, filled the planet with sound and splendor, then faded to dream stuff and passed away. The Greek and the Roman followed and made a vast noise, and they are gone. Other peoples have sprung up and held their torch high for a time, but it burned out and they sit in twilight now or have vanished. The Jew saw them all, beat them all, and is now what he always was, exhibiting no decadence, no infirmities of age, no weakening of his parts, no slowing of his energies, no dulling of his alert and aggressive mind. All things are mortal, but the Jew. All other forces pass, but he remains. What is the secret of his immortality? So the secret of the survival of the Jewish people is Hashem and his Torah, because Hashem is the one that promised us that we would survive. And what we have to remember when dealing with the insanity that we've been seeing much more overtly lately is that we are Hashem's people, and he is our Hashem, our God. And the thing that makes the Jew unique, that makes each one of us unique, and as well as unique as a nation, is the Jewish soul. And the Jewish soul is activated by the catalyst of Torah. When a Jew plugs into Torah, and by Torah, I mean all of Jewish wisdom, when a Jew plugs into Torah, their soul is turned on, and that activates the immortality, okay? And as we go further into this, I'm going to explain some of the things that have to do with why we've survived, what the anti-Semitism is about, and what a uniquely Jewish response must be to it. And all of this is going to be discussed in the light of Torah, okay? What the Torah, again, all the body of Jewish wisdom has to teach us about anti-Semitism. Now, I want to also just make one point that questions we'll take at the end, okay? Questions and comments at the end. But right now, what I'd like to do is share with you some of my personal experience, okay? So when I first moved to Borough Park in Brooklyn, which is a Haredi neighborhood, okay? A lot of Hasidim, okay? When I first moved here about 17 years ago, I was standing at a bus stop very close to my house. And on the bus stop, on the sign on the bus stop was drawn a swastika. And I had to take this bus somewhere. And I took the bus, and I had to take a car service home, whatever. I didn't take the bus home. But when I got home, I decided that the next day I was going to go out. And I didn't have a cell phone with a camera back then. I don't even know if they existed back then. I was going to take my camera, photograph it, and say something. The next day I went out. The sign post was pulled up. The bus stop was gone. And there was a sign that said, "This route has been removed." And I didn't know what to make of it. But one of the things that I learned after all these years of living here was that the number of anti-Semitic events that go unreported, that my neighbors experience, that I experience, that my husband has experienced, is massive. And the reason that they go unreported is manyfold. But basically because the response has always been tepid. And as long as the property damage isn't extreme, or God forbid someone would be hurt, people are rather quiet about it. Okay, is that the right response? We'll talk about it later on. So it did bother me at the time, but then I began to notice more and more and more overt anti-Semitism. Now, at that time in my married life, I wore a sheitel, a wig. And I used to take the subway into the city for meetings and various things. And it was always a relatively, stinky, dirty, unpleasant experience, but not an anti-Semitic one. Never had any issues. And then one time, my husband and I took the subway in together. And we were sitting on the train. This is the first time this happened. We were sitting on the train, and three boys that I would say were probably, well, they weren't such boys, they're probably in their 20s or late teens, that I would say were probably from one of the local mosques of that persuasion, use the motion. A Jew's not allowed to make this motion, but the motion where you saw across your neck, the motion of slitting one's throat. And they saw my husband and they did that. And I was shocked and horrified. And he said, "Just ignore them. It happens all the time." I said, "What do you mean?" And my husband looks overtly religious. A woman in a wig people don't always know that she's religious. Okay, but he's a black hat, he has payas, he has a black coat, and people know that he is obviously, very obviously a Jew. And this was shocking to me that this could happen in New York. As a matter of fact, he told me it happened all the time when he got off the train and he entered his workplace. Those 2 blocks were perilous. He was shouted out at and so on. So little by little, I began to learn that this was just part of life, being a Jew, being a visible Jew in Brooklyn, in New York City. And it was something that we had to put up with. And I wanted to know why we had to put up with it, because prior to this, I had been very involved with education about Israel and about bias against Israel, especially in communications in the media, and most especially dealing with the New York Times. That's a whole other world, a whole other subject. And I really wanted to know why. And I began to really ask questions of people here where I live, as well as Rabbanim, various rabbis, as well as doing a lot of reading. And what I've learned in the past 17 years is something that's just become so much of a part of me that I didn't think that it was anything surprising to anyone. So, for example, I had a lot of neighbors, they're all gone now, elderly neighbors, beautiful neshamas who were Holocaust survivors. And I got a lot of information from them. And I had a lot of exchanges with them, a lot of conversations with them. And it was very enlightening to me. And basically, what I was taught and told again and again and again was an expression. Esav sone leYaakov. Esav hates Yaakov. And what this expression came from and what it means is what I want to discuss today in part, because recently many people who are not so easily identifiable as a Jew have been attacked, and people have been asking me a lot of questions and been very, very concerned. So not to minimize the attacks, and it's something that we're going to really talk about some very proactive responses to this at the end of this talk. But what I want to do is explain what that means. Now, I want to preface this by saying right away, along with that paragraph I read in the beginning from Mark Twain, that what we have to understand is that when I'm going to speak of Esav, or Esau in English, when I speak of Esav or Yishmael, I am not speaking about everybody in the world except Jews. We know that there are many, many good people in this world, and we're leaving them out of it. We're going to talk about what it means to be a spiritual heir to the ideologies and the characterological makeup of Esav and Yishmael. Okay, mostly we're going to focus on Esav, which I'll explain why. Okay, so there is a very famous quote from the Medrash, Halacha hi b'yadua she'asav soneh leYaakov. It means there is a well-known halacha that Esav hates Yaakov. Okay, it's a halacha. What is a halacha? A halacha is a Jewish law. What it actually means is that not that it's a Jewish law, but that we can reflexively assume that there is going to be hatred against us. Mark Twain's quote was not the norm, okay, and is still not the norm today. All right. Rav Avigdor Miller says that if you asked a German Jew before World War II, before the Shmad, if you asked him if a German, his neighbor would one day murder him, okay, Rav Miller says the Jew would have said, no, the Germans are the most civilized, enlightened people, and they love humanity, and they're intellectuals, and they're refined, and so on. And Rav Avigdor Miller says even further, if you asked a German himself, would one day you murder or collude to murder your Jewish neighbor, the German himself would have been shocked and horrified by this. Okay. Most Germans. That's what Rav Miller says before World War II. And the lesson from this is that, according to Rav Miller, and I'm condensing it, if anybody's interested, I will be giving a reading list at the end. Okay, so you can look this up for yourself. But the lesson is that the idea that somebody who's perfectly civilized, kind, supportive, a good neighbor, somebody that you break bread with, can't turn and tap into their inner anti-Semite if they have one, again, not everyone, is a myth. And Rav Miller, who was born in 1908 in Baltimore, he died in the late 20th century, late-ish, mid to late 20th century. He said, don't kid yourselves. Don't think that just because a land is civilized and egalitarian, and democratic, that things can't change. Don't be fooled. Now, for those of you who know Rav Avigdor Miller, you know that he was not a lightweight. He was a very important Rav in America for Jews of all stripes, I want to add. Okay. The Lubavitcher Rebbe also said, Esav soneh leYaakov. He repeated it in a couple of his talks. to not think for a moment that we are really accepted. We are a people that stands apart. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe said that we should be proud to stand apart. We have to understand that we have a special role in this world. And of course, many other Rebbes and rabbis said this and discussed this. Many of our sages discussed this. And the idea is, as long as a Jew recognizes that this world is different from his perception of it, and that he is not of this world totally, then he will be living life without illusions, with emunah, and he won't be afraid. Because ultimately, this comes down to what we're afraid of. So, what are we afraid of? So, in Russia, in the 1920s, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson, obviously Lubavitch Rebbe of the time, previous Lubavitch Rebbe, was held and tortured for promoting Judaism, basically. They called it counter-revolutionary activities. And what did he do? What was his activities? He created yeshivas, mikvahs, and other things that weren't allowed. And he said, well, I don't care, because I'm loyal to Hashem, not the Russians. So the Rebbe was interrogated many, many times and tortured many, many times. And he always defied the people torturing him. And once one of his torturers, who I heard was an apostate Jew, held a pistol to the Rebbe's head, God forbid, and said, this toy here has a way of making people talk and cooperate. And the Rebbe said, that toy is persuasive to a person who has many gods and only one world. I have only one God, and I have two worlds. Okay, so that's another very famous quote. So what does a Rebbe mean? He means that if you're worshiping this world and you believe that you're in charge, then fear is your partner. Fear and manipulation and controlling people through fear is your partner. But if you believe in Hashem, and you believe and trust and have faith that everything is coming from him, including the gun to his head, including the anti-Semitism, including even the torture that he underwent, if you believe that this is all from Hashem and you accept it and believe it, doesn't mean you don't fight against it. And we'll talk about that later. Okay. But if you believe it, then you are not afraid. You're not afraid. And of course, we know he survived. Okay. So what I want to do now is I want to talk a little bit about the roots. And we're going to go to Parshas Toldos and the story of Esav and Yaakov. And I know that this story is familiar to many of you. Okay. So in the Parshas Toldos, which is in the book of Bereshis, which in the fall, again, God willing, after Simchas Torah, we're going to start up all over again with the Parshas. We know that Yaakov and Esav were kicking in Rivka's womb. We're told that Isaac and Rebekah, Yitzchak and Rivka didn't have children. Rivka prayed and prayed and prayed for children, as did Yitzchak. Finally, she gets pregnant and she's expecting twins, and they're kicking inside her. And it's extremely, extremely painful. Okay. So painful that she complains about it. And she didn't merit, by the way, to give birth to the 12 tribes because of her complaints. That's another issue, but it is a little bit related here because tzaddikim are held to higher standards than you or I. So Rivka and Yitzchak were held to a higher standard than we are. So they kicked and they fought. And the Medrash says that whenever they went by the base Medrash, the house of learning, the house of Torah study, Yaakov would push to get out. Whenever they went by disgusting places, bars or parties or whatever, Esav would push to get out. Okay, so there was this battle even from conception, and then they were born. And as it turned out, Esav was the firstborn. We know that Yaakov grabbed a hold of his heel, and still he didn't come first. Yet the reason we're taught by the Medrash that he grabbed a hold was because he knew he was going to be the spiritual heir to Yitzchak. He was aware as a neshama in the womb of what Esav's predilections were. We could see, because he could see when Esav was fighting and wanting to get out when they were in bad places. And he said, I'm the one who needs to be first. So what happened? So we know the story, and we know that Esav came in from the field, and he came in from the fields, and he sold his birthright for a mess of red lentil soup. Okay, now Esav, the name Esav means fully developed. Esav came out of the womb characterologically developed, and also he happened to be hairy as well. So he had like development of an older child. When he sold his birthright for the red lentil soup, his name was changed to Edom. Edom comes from the color red, like earth, and his name is now called Esav and sometimes Edom. And Edom is what often we refer to when we speak about present day situations, and we'll talk about that shortly. So there was this big fight, and Esav regretted selling his birthright for the soup. However, the Medrash tells us he was also paid in gold. Okay, we know that Esav, despite his projection on the Jews, Esav loves gold. Esav loves money very, very much. As a matter of fact, the Medrash says it's one of his defining characteristics is his love of money. Okay, so Esav was not tricked at this point. He willingly didn't care that he sold his birthright for the lentil soup. He was hungry, and he really didn't care. He said, what is it worth to me? It's worth nothing. Who cares about it? There's no money in it. So that was what the issue was for him. It had nothing to do with gold or money, the birthright, because Yitzchak was going to bequeath to him spiritual assets, not material assets. Esav's whole worldview is like the person who held the gun to Rabbi Schneerson's head that I spoke about previously. His whole worldview is I have this world, I have many gods. One is my worship of money, one is my worship of power, and so on and so forth. Yaakov, okay, his world was Torah, Hashem, serving Hashem, and knowing and believing, just like Rabbi Schneerson, that there's one God and two worlds. There's this world, which is the world that's our proving ground. It's the world we do mitzvahs in. It's a world that's tough, it's hard, no matter what, no matter how much you have, it's not easy. Okay, for a Jew, it's never easy. We're always struggling. Okay, if we're not struggling with external things, we're struggling internally. This is what Hashem wants from us. He wants the struggle in order that we grow and come closer to him. And even though it's difficult, Yaakov wanted this. He wanted this inheritance, the inheritance of struggling and pushing to come closer to Hashem. Some of you may have heard that that's why he was named Yisrael, which means someone who combats or wrestles with Hashem's. That's a popular interpretation. The point is that there's two values, two opposing values. Now, Esav decided that he would kill his father. Chas v'shalom. He would kill Yitzchak, okay, according to the Medrash. And he reasoned like this. Cain killed his brother Abel, okay? Cain killed his brother Hevel before Adam died. That's foolish. After Hevel was removed, Adam begot yet another son, Shes. I'm going to do better. I'll wait until my father's death to kill Yaakov, and then I'll be the only son and heir. Okay. Now, Pharaoh thought something else, okay, because we're going to see how our enemies think. Pharaoh thought Esav waited until Yitzchak died before attempting to kill his brother. How foolish of him. Did he not realize that his brother would meanwhile beget children? Let us be wiser. We will throw all newborn baby boys into the river. Okay. Then we're going to get to Haman from the Purim story. Okay, Haman is very, very instructive and has a lot to teach us about anti-Semitism. Haman reasoned, how silly of Paroi. Didn't he realize that the girls would marry and bear children? I'll wipe them all out, young and old, boys and girls, God forbid. Gog and Magog will say in the future, how foolish of Haman. Didn't he know that they have a protector in heaven? We will first overcome their protector and then destroy them. Okay. So Hashem's response is, you foolish, evil schemers. I have many messengers, many agents who can frustrate your plans. Then I will wage war against the nations. And on that day, Hashem will be the only sole king of the universe. Okay. So why did I read that Medrash? That Medrash shows an evolution of hatred. It shows that we were hated and that our hatred was not necessarily for any one of the reasons that anti-Semites say, but at their core, because from a spiritual perspective, this hatred endures because we have a spiritual birthright that they rejected, they didn't want, okay, in the form of Esav. They didn't want this. They threw it away. And then they decided they also wanted it along with all the gold and all the pleasures of this world. That is the spiritual source of what I said in the beginning. Halacha b'yedua, Esav soneh leYaakov. It's a known halakha, it's a known rule that Esav hates Yaakov. That's the source. Okay. Now, we're going to talk briefly now about who Esav is, and then I want to talk about Yishmael, and then I want to talk about Esav and Yishmael together. Okay. So, who is Esav today? So the rabbis say that Esav was Rome. Some say specifically the church. Okay. But what we really understand from this, what we really have to understand from this, if everybody would just mute, please mute. Thank you. What we have to understand from this is that Esav is, it doesn't mean necessarily that every person who connects with a church or something like this is, God forbid, a hater. We don't want to say that. We can't paint a broad brush. But what we can say is that in general, the Western hatred of Jews is said to stem from this particular cause. Okay, and it may be allied with, in some ways, Christianity, and we're not going to gloss over the history of Christian persecution of Jews, but what I want to say is that today that isn't the overarching hatred that we're dealing with. Anybody who doesn't watch the mainstream media knows that. Okay, now there's another point to this hatred, and that is why is Har Sinai, Mount Sinai, called Har Sinai? So if you hear those words, Soneh and Sinai, right, they're related, and it comes from Sina, hatred. They share a root, okay? And the reason is that we are not hated, says the Gemara, because of anything we did, but because they are aware that we are the chosen nation. Ata bechartanu mikol ha'amim. We are the chosen nation. We were chosen from among the nations because we accepted the Torah and they rejected it. Okay, so this ties in with Esav. Esav rejected the birthright. Later on, the nations, the 70 nations, rejected the Torah. They had their chance. And they said, no, we don't want so many restrictions. We want to enjoy this world more. Okay. So the key to this is, and what the Gemara says there, that's in Shabbos, in Masechet Shabbos, and what the Gemara says in other places, as well as other sages, is that the key is there really isn't a reason. Okay. We didn't steal the birthright. They didn't want the birthright. They just don't want us to have it. Okay. Now, do people consciously think this, anti-Semites consciously think this? Probably not. Okay. Anti-Semites probably aren't aware of this, but we are assured that this is pretty much part of the eternal hatred. Next, Yishmael. Yishmael, okay, we know was Abraham's first son. Okay. But we know that Yitzchak was the chosen one. And we understand that Yishmael wasn't from the same mother as Yaakov, as Yitzchak, and that Yishmael, okay, turned out to be a pretty bad character in many ways. And I'm not going to go too much into the story because I want to get to the end part of this class. But basically, Yishmael, his heirs today are the heirs of more of the East, especially the Middle East, those religions and those people who hate us virulently. And we're seeing much, much more of it openly in America today. Okay. Joined by who supports them? People who in some way are related to Gog and Magog. People who think that Hashem doesn't exist at all and that they are going to conquer heaven. They're going to decide what's what. And they support Yishmael in this battle. It's very interesting. It's a very strange marriage. Now, in case anybody thinks I'm speaking in code, I'm not. I just don't want to go into all the politics of it and all the details right now because our time is limited. Maybe we'll do another talk on what it really means. And the idea is that what strange bedfellows. You have people who believe in Allah, their name for God, hating the Jews, wanting to kill us, dropping thousands and thousands of rockets on us. They just massive riots in Manhattan, just Erev Shabbos, just on Friday. Massive and really shocking stuff. And their supporters are the secular left, the people who reject Hashem completely. Okay. Now, we know from predictions that Esav and Yishmael are going to join forces in the end of days, okay, to fight the Jews, whether it's politically, whether it's spiritually, or whether it's, God forbid, physically. The forces will be combined. We see this, okay? It's not a big surprise to anyone here, I hope, that we see this at the UN, okay? We see this in our government, and we shouldn't be shocked by it. We shouldn't be really upset by it, because this is the sign that the end times are near, Mashiach is near, and soon we'll have the redemption, please God. And we will all be able to live the best possible way in this world, the way we were meant to live, in peace, in harmony, in brotherhood, sisterhood. Okay. So why will they join forces at the end of time? Because subtly they are joined, because the Midrash tells us that Esav married a lot of Canaanites and women who were idol worshippers, also married one of Yishmael's daughters. He married Yishmael's his uncle. I'm trying to do the family tree in my head. He married one of his daughters, and they formed a lasting union. Now, we're not just talking about physical genetics, physical descendants. There may be some. We're really not talking about that. We're talking about spiritual heirs to the ideologies of both Esav and Yishmael. Yishmael's ideologies were such that they were slightly different than Esav's. And Yishmael, one of the things we know for sure is that in the Middle Eastern religion, they switched Yitzchak and Yishmael in their Quran. It says openly. Whoever's not muted, please be sure to mute yourself. Okay, please don't go unmute. That they for sure, okay, switched Yishmael and Yitzchak. They rewrote the Torah. Anybody who's ever looked at a Quran, you can verify it for yourself. They actually rewrote the Torah. And they're angry because they feel that we have their legacy. And are people aware of this today? In that particular group of haters, yes, they are. Don't think it's just about land. Don't think it's about politics. It's about religion for sure. It's about religion in that case. Okay. Now, so what does all this mean? These are the spiritual roots. How do we respond to this eternal hatred? Can we fix it? Can we stop it? What should we do? How should we protect ourselves? This is really the nut of the issue. So the first thing that what we have to understand about being a Jew is that a Jew possesses three qualities. Rachamim, okay, Baishanim, and Gomle Chasad, okay? I don't know why I had that memorized. I don't know why I forgot. Probably because I'm still have Yishmael in my mind. A Jew is, by their nature, especially when their nature is shaped by the structure of Torah. That piece can't be missing, like we said in the beginning. A Jew is very merciful, compassionate by nature. A Jew also is a Bashanim. We are Bashanim. We are modest, and we have holy shame, not toxic shame, holy shame. Okay, if we don't have Torah, we might have toxic shame, where we're ashamed of ourselves in a very negative, destructive way. What is holy shame? What does it mean to have this busha, this quality? It means that we feel when we've done something that's pushed us away from Hashem, we feel a twinge inside. We don't like it. We feel unsettled. Okay, if we're not merciful, for example, or we're unkind. I mean, we all have our moments. We won't feel well. It will feel bad for days. This is part of our spiritual characterological makeup. And the last one is we do chasadim, we do kindnesses, we are benevolent, we are generous, we give. If we say we're going to give, we give. We don't say we're going to give and not give. We give. So this idea is that these characteristics are the key to how we're supposed to respond to this hatred. we start with how we treat each other. How we treat each other is very, very important, because when Hashem's children all love each other, okay, Hashem has nachas. He has pleasure from it. We're taught this, that we can give Hashem pleasure by loving each other, by not having fractures within the Jewish people, by getting along, by loving Hashem, by loving his Torah. Okay. When we all are unified in kindness, in modesty. No, you go first. No, you go first. Sincere modesty. You understand? When we all have this kind of unification and we're kind to each other and we give to each other, we are sweetening this terrible decree that we undergo. We're taught this. The next thing is the step of tefillah, prayer. We have to pray for relief. Now, I'm going to talk about physical shtadlanus that we do. I'll explain what that is in a minute. But we have to pray. We have to remind ourselves and each other. Did you pray today about what's going on with the attacks? We must pray. We must pray. We must pray. We must talk to Hashem. Hashem is sending us this rise. I mean, it used to be, like I said in the beginning, it used to be, you would see this in my neighborhood. Manhattan, no, we really didn't see this. I mean, if you went to Manhattan looking like a Hasidic Jewish man, you might experience some things, but we didn't see what we're seeing today, okay, where people who aren't necessarily visibly identifiable as being Jewish, okay, a woman's just sitting down in a cafe and she has things thrown at her, okay, this is a problem. And again, the way is this unification and prayer. And what I want to suggest to you as a uniquely Jewish response, okay, is something that I've done with two groups of people, okay, and that is that we set up Tehillim groups, and over Shabbos, we all complete the book of Tehillim. What is Tehillim? Psalms. King David's words are the words that bring salvations. So we need to pray in our own words. Please, Hashem, help us. And then we need to read King David's words. Rebbe Nachman said, if we understood the power of Psalms, we would be saying them all day long. Same with Hisbodedus, which I'll mention in a minute. So what I'd like to suggest as a response is, I don't know, so not obviously, we had 60 people register and 60 people did not show up, but hopefully they'll watch it on the video. And if every other person here said, you know what, I know 10 people, I'm going to do a Tehillim group with them so we can complete the entire book of Tehillim, of Psalms, each week. Okay, it doesn't have to just be on Shabbat. Well, over the course of a week. So if you have 10 people, each person can say approximately 15 Psalms. Some are longer, some are shorter. You can divide them up, okay? And we can say them in the merit of the protection of Klal Yisrael, of the Jewish people, okay? We've already started that in a few cases. So that's something I'd like to suggest that you do, whoever is listening, whoever's watching. Okay, prayer. The other part of prayer is Hisbodedus, Hitbodedut, which is where we talk to Hashem in our own voice about what's going on, what we're really thinking and feeling. So for somebody who is traumatized and suffering through this time period of rising anti-Semitism, this may be new for them. They may not have expected it. It may be a shock. It may be very frightening. And in fact, it is frightening because they're getting more and more violent. Okay. I mean, we haven't seen this since the knockout gangs of the Obama administration, when they used to come to Borough Park in Williamsburg and just knock out anybody who was visibly Jewish. And people just come up and punch us. And it's like a reversion back to those times. So if you're seeing that, please, You know, please, if you're afraid, please spend some time, your own personal prayer time, your own meditation time. Spend some time, take a few minutes of that time to ask Hashem to protect not only you, but all the Jewish people. It goes back to that unity thing. That's a Jewish response. First thing really is Achdus, is that unity. It's important to recognize our good qualities. And the next thing, really, prayer really comes first, but I wanted to sandwich in between two things. Okay, so prayers is vital. Everything comes from our relationship with Hashem. Everything comes from Hashem. The good and the not so good come from Hashem. The next thing, okay, and the response that I want to mention that's very important. Some people are politically active. Some people have legal resources. Some people have connections. This is called shtadlanus. It's a Jewish tradition that if you know the king of Spain during the Inquisition, like the Abarbanel did, okay, he was the treasurer to Ferdinand and Isabella. And he didn't manage to end the Inquisition, but he did manage to mitigate some of the suffering. We need people to represent us. If you know someone who can, who's connected, or you're connected, don't be shy. Do that legal work. Now, I want to say that with a caveat that all the Rabbanim say. I quoted Rav Miller in the beginning, and I'll give you some books to read. I will send out, anybody just send me an email if you want the reading list. I'm not going to just post it publicly. And this idea is that when we respond to anti-Semitism, the worst thing we can do is to descend to that level of anger, hatred, nivelpe, it's called, you know, a foul mouth, of name-calling, violence. There's not a single Rav that says that this is appropriate. Not a single Torah source that says we should become like animals in our combat of them. Now, do we have to physically defend ourselves? Absolutely, 100%. Okay, I was speaking with Charlene earlier, and I wanted to tell her, and I told her that if I have time, I wanted to bring up someone. His name was Mahatma Gandhi. Everybody knows who he was. We do not follow what he said. Mahatma Gandhi is very famous for his very anti-Semitic proclamation. Most of you probably have heard of it, that if the Jews really want to conquer Hitler, Yamach Shemo, he said they should just passively just accept the abuse, and that will put them at a higher level spiritually than him. No, we don't buy that. We don't turn the other cheek. We don't allow ourselves to be killed. We fight back for sure. But and we can throw Gandhi in the dust heaps of history for his vile remark. But what we have to do is we have to, at the same time, not descend to the level of they're fighting with their fists, we're going to go out and go and meet their protest and fight back. No, we're going to try to get it stopped. We're going to try every legal means, every civilized means, every organized means, every means within our power to stop it. And if there is violence, we'll stop that. We have to be certainly defensive. And if that means we have to protect ourselves physically, then we have to do that. But again, we shouldn't meet them at that level of name calling and attacks and violent protests and so on and so forth, because they're going to hate us. The people who hate us, says, all the Rabbanim are going to hate us pretty much no matter what we do. And our job is to appease the people we can appease, and the other people to find other ways to thwart them, intelligent ways to thwart them. Okay, and if not, okay, then we have to defend for real, physically. It's all for real. So anyway, I gave you an overview of the Jewish response. Tefillah and unity are extremely important. tefillah, prayer is first. It really has to be with us in our hearts, on our lips, you know, I would say 16 hours a day, the times that we're not asleep. We have to take that time to focus and ask Hashem to help the Jewish people. And if every single Jew took 1 minute of their whatever time they're making hisbodedus each day. Some of you I know are doing 60 minutes a day, an hour a day. Some of you might be doing 5 minutes a day. Some of you may not be doing it yet. That's okay. Whatever time you have, take even 1/60th of it, 1/60th of it, and help nullify this decree. Now, the other thing I want to say is that all of this is a prelude to the Geula, the redemption, and the coming of Mashiach. We can take comfort from knowing and believing and seeing with our eyes that just as the prophets predicted, things are heating up. Things are heating up. And the European rabbis said that America was the last gullus, the last exile. Okay. We have to remember we're in exile, and this is the last one. If you would like to learn more about Mashiach and the Geula, if the concept is unfamiliar to you, or you haven't done much reading, or you'd like to just a refresher, Dr. Eleanor Gaudas sponsored this book, and we are giving it out for free. It's Mashiach, Hope for Turbulent Times, Questions and Answers about the Jewish Messiah. If you like the book and if you got it already and you liked it and you want to send out more copies, I actually have free copies that have already been sponsored. You don't even have to buy them. Just get in touch with me and I will send you the copies, okay? Because somebody's paid for them to go out, and either Hannah or I will send them out to you. And if you just like a copy for yourself, just let us know. And we have several copies to give out. When those are gone, we are going to be publishing it on Amazon to make it easier to get to people, because Hannah's the one who's really doing the big schlepping to the post office, and I'm going to mailing centers and stuff. And we would just like to make it more accessible. So everyone, we're just about at the end. If you want to ask questions, I'm going to ask that you please write them in chat, not verbally. So feel free to type in questions, because the verbally is going to be too confusing with 16, 17 people on. Did I speak about Har Sinai? Yes, I did. And Sina, yes, I did. Thank you, Charlene. So if anybody has any questions, if anybody would like the mailing to get my reading list, my suggested reading, feel free to email me. Everybody should have the email, okay? And okay, any more questions? Just Charlene? Okay, that was very easy. So thank you everyone for coming. Thank you again to Lisa Posner for sponsoring this lesson. Thank you.
Thank you, Chaya Rivka.
Thank you so much, Lisa. And thank you so much, Charlene, for all your help. And oh, no questions. Okay, we're good. Okay. All right, everyone. I wish you all the best. This will be posted on YouTube, and hopefully it won't get taken down. I'm a little nervous about that, but we'll see what happens. Okay. Have a great Sunday. And
thank you.
Thank you, Hannah. Join me Tuesday for the Parsha class. Everyone, feel free to join me for the Parsha class. And I look forward to seeing you, and stay strong and have a lot of emunah and bitachon, a lot of faith and trust in Hashem. This is part of the plan. Support each other, hang in there, get your psalm groups together. Okay.
Amen.
Bye.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.